Welcome to this Scratch lesson, which is going to focus on using Scratch to create a fireworks show. So I'm going to show you how to make one type of firework, and then I'm going to get you guys to think of your own firework designs, and if you put them all together, then you can create a really impressive show using Scratch. So the first step is, let's get rid of the cat, and then I'm going to hover over the plus symbol and choose Paint. Now this is going to be the rocket that gets fired up into the sky at the start of a firework. So I'm just going to draw a kind of rockety shape like this. Now I'm not going to do it very accurately. You can see my drawing isn't great, but I think that you can probably do a much better job if you're careful. So there's my rocket. Okay, now let's write the code for it. So I'll go to Events and choose when green flag clicked. Now I'm going to go to Control and choose Forever. Now this is going to fire off rockets over and over again, and each rocket needs to be first of all pointing upwards. So I'm going to choose Point in Direction, and the direction needs to be upwards. Okay, now I want my rocket to move up, so I'm going to go to Control and choose Repeat, and then I'm going to choose Motion, and I'm going to choose Move Forward. So move. Now I don't want 10 steps because it's going to be quite fast. I want something slower, so I'm going to choose 2 steps. Now if I run that program now, the rocket will move up and it will just keep going upwards forever. So a couple of changes I want to make. I want to make the rocket smaller because that rocket is too big, and also I want to make sure that the rocket starts in the right place. So I'm going to choose Go to X and Y, and the X value is going to be 0, which puts it in the middle of the screen, and the Y value is going to be -160, which will put it at the bottom of the screen. So now if I run it again, now that rocket isn't going far enough, so I'm going to change the repeat here up to 100. And now the rocket goes up and it stops. Not bad, not bad. I think actually maybe it could go a little bit faster, so I'll change it to 3 steps and decrease the repeat to 70. Let's try that. I think that's okay. Okay, now that rocket is going to be the rocket that sets up the fireworks explosion. What's going to happen is when the rocket gets to the top, it's going to explode. So what I want to do there is I'm going to have a message which is broadcast to say explode. And if you haven't used messages before, well, you probably have used messages before, but let's just remind you how to do it. So you go to Events, and then you choose Broadcast, and you can pick a different message to broadcast. So in this case, I'll drag that over here, and I'm going to make a new message. So I'll choose New Message, and this message is going to be called Explode. So I'll type that in. Okay. Now when I broadcast the explode message, what's going to happen is that rocket is going to create lots and lots of new sprites, and those new sprites will shower down like firework particles. So it's this effect that's going to be a little bit tricky, so let's look at how to do it. First of all, I'm going to add a new sprite. And the sprite I'm going to use needs to be something that could be a bit of a firework. So I'm going to go for the star, I think. Let's pick that star. Okay, and I probably want it to be a bit smaller, so I'll change the size down to about 20. Okay, now this star is going to wait until it gets the broadcast message explode. So I drag over this one when I receive explode. Okay, now I'm going to need to create lots and lots of small stars. So you probably know that the way to do that is using the clone command. I'm going to drag over Repeat, and then I'm going to use Create Clone of Myself. Okay, so now that's going to create 10 stars. Now each clone needs to do something slightly different, so I'm going to drag over when I start as a clone, and the first thing that the clone has to do is it needs to start in the place where the rocket is exploding. So I go to motion and I choose go to, now my rocket is called Sprite 1 there. Let's just change the name before I go any further. So I'll select it and change the name to rocket. Okay, now I can go to rocket, so whenever I create a clone it's going to go to the rocket's position and it's going to explode from there. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is the clone is going to move outwards, so I'm going to have two variables. I'm going to go to the variables tab and I'm going to click make a variable. Now the first variable will be called up, and I need to click the for this sprite only. Now this is going to be a measure of how fast the star is moving up. Now I'm going to make another variable and I'm going to call it right. This will be a measure of how far the star is moving right, and I'll also put for this star only, and click OK. Now each star is going to be moving a different speed up and a different speed right, so I'm going to set those variables to random values. So I'll choose set my variable to and change the variable to up, and then I'll have another set my variable, and this variable will be right. Now I'll go to operators, and each of those are going to be random numbers between -10 and 10. Okay, so when I create a clone of the star, it's going to start in the position where the rocket is, and it's going to have random numbers for the speed that it's going up and the speed that it's going right. So now I go to control and I'm going to choose repeat until, and I'll go to sensing and I'm going to choose touching edge. So this means that I'm going to keep moving each star until it gets to the edge of the screen. Now when it gets to the edge of the screen, I'm going to use delete this clone so that the star disappears. Okay, we're almost there with the star. What's the last thing we've got to do? Well, we've got to make the star actually move, so I'm going to go to motion and I'm going to go change X by and change Y by and put those inside the repeat until loop. Now change X by should be the variable right, and change Y by should be the variable up. So there's the finished program code. When I broadcast the explode message, it's going to create 10 stars, and each star is going to have a random number which tells it how fast to go up and a random number which tells it how fast to go right. Now those random numbers could be negative, so if the random number is negative, then instead of going up it will go down, or instead of going right it will go left. Okay, so let's test out this program. Up goes the rocket, and then there go the stars. Now the stars aren't all appearing out of the rocket. What happens is the rocket gets to the top and then it starts producing stars, but then the rocket moves back down to the bottom and some of the stars are actually being produced from the bottom of the rocket rather than the top. Now the reason for that is because the stars don't all appear at the same time. What we want to do is make sure that all of those stars appear at the same time, and you might think, how can you do that? There is a little bit of a trick that you can use in Scratch. So what you need to do is go to My Blocks and choose Make a Block. Now we create a block name which I'm going to call Star Explosion. Okay, and here's where the trick comes in. You have to tick this box which says Run Without Screen Refresh. Now that means that all of the stars will appear at the same time instead of each star appearing at a different time. Now I click OK. Now I take everything that I've done inside my repeat until loop. So I'm just going to move that repeat until loop out. and put that inside the star explosion. Okay, so this is the thing that generates the, oh sorry, I've moved the wrong thing. What an idiot. Sorry guys, just a second. That's not the loop I want. This is the loop I want. So I'm going to move that repeat loop into the star explosion, and then I'm going to put star explosion over here. Okay, so what happens now is that when the explosion message is received by the stars, it does this star explosion block, which is in pink. And the star explosion block creates all of the stars which are exploding. But the special trick is that the star explosion block had that box ticked, okay, and the box tells it that all of the stars should be created simultaneously. So let's try it again. Up goes the rocket, and there we go, all of our stars appear at the same time. Okay, not bad. Let's see if we can make this a little bit more realistic now. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make the stars spin around a little bit. I think that just makes it look a bit cooler. So let's take this turn, and I'm actually going to make them turn an angle which depends on the speed that they're moving left or right. Because again, it tends to look better if they're turning different angles rather than if they're all turning by exactly the same angle. Now the second thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to make the rocket move up in a slightly random path. So I'll go back to rocket, and as that's moving upwards, I'm also going to add a turn, but I'm going to make the amount that it turns a little bit random. So I'll pick a random number, maybe between -3 and 3. So it's not very random, but it's just going to make the rocket wobble a little bit, and it might end up in different positions. So there we go, it's kind of wobbling. There we go. Okay, I kind of feel that rocket could go a little bit faster, so maybe I'll change it to 4 steps, and the number of times I'll repeat the rocket, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to make that random as well. So the more things you make random, in a way, the more interesting the fireworks show is, because it means that each firework is going to be slightly different from the one before. So let's try that. There we go. Now the rockets they all go in different places. I think I might make that rocket a little bit smaller as well. So let's make the rocket a bit smaller. Decrease the size, maybe even to 10. There we go. Very small rocket now. Okay, next thing to make this look better, instead of just creating 10 stars, let's create 50 stars. Okay, and now I still have this original star, which kind of looks a bit weird there. So what I'll do is, to make sure that original star doesn't show, I will make it invisible. And then of course, if I make the sprite invisible, I need to make sure that all of the clones are visible. So I'll drag show over to here, so that the clones are visible. Okay, let's try that now, see if that looks better. So there goes the rocket. Pow. Okay. Okay. Wow, it's really producing lots of stars there. Now let's try and add in a bit of a delay. So I'm going to, instead of just sending up one rocket after another, I'm going to put a delay before the next rocket goes up. So at the beginning, before I actually fire the rocket, I'm just going to wait a little bit, and then I'll fire the rocket up. Now another thing that I'm going to do to make it look a bit more exciting is I'm going to go to the Looks tab, and I'm going to change the color effect each time the star moves around. That's going to make the stars flash. So let's try that now. Oh, I've got a... Oh, there it goes. There we go. Okay. Now, guys, that's fine so far. One of the other things that I think often looks quite good is you can actually make the stars have a bit of gravity on them. So to do that, go to Variables and choose Change variable. Now the variable you want to change is the amount that the star is moving up. Okay, and just try decreasing it, so change it by -1 each time. If I run this now, there we go. Now you can see that the particles, when they explode, they actually kind of fall back to Earth a little bit. I think it might look even better if I set the up value to maybe only -4 to 10 instead of, or -5 to 10 instead of -10 to 10. That means more stars are going to be facing upwards when it explodes. I don't know that that made a big difference, but okay, never mind. Okay, let's add some sound now. So I want to have a sound that goes with my explosion. So I'm going to go to sounds, and there is a sound already here. It's not a very good sound though. So let's go back to rocket. I'm gonna, oh, what's the pop sound? No, don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to pick a new sound. I'll go to plus here to choose a sound. And I probably want an effect. Let's see what effects I've got. Now, one of the things I've noticed about Scratch, it doesn't have great sound effects, but that one is probably okay. So I'm going to choose crunch, and then I'll go back to my rocket code, and when it explodes I'm going to play the crunch sound. So I'll go to sound, and I'm going to choose play sound crunch, but I don't want play sound crunch until done. I just want start sound crunch. Okay, let's try that now. I'm also going to decrease that repeat random number. Just going to make it a little bit less, maybe 70 there. Okay, let's try again. So there goes the rocket. Okay, so that starts to feel a bit more satisfying because it's got an explosion sound. I can make that explosion a little bit more realistic if I change the pitch. So let's choose set pitch effect and make it a bit deeper, so -200 maybe. Let's see if that makes it sound more like an explosion. There we go. That sounds a bit more like an explosion. Okay, now at the moment my fireworks are all against a white background, and that's not very realistic. So I'm going to go here to background. I'm going to choose something. Let's go for Night City. Okay, so this seems like a good background for fireworks. Let's try that. Okay, that's looking better. But I can make it even more realistic. I'm going to add a little bit of code into that background. So remember that when the firework explodes, it does that by broadcasting the explode message. So I'm going to put something here which says when I receive explode. Now what do I want to do? Well, first of all I'm going to change the brightness of the background by 100. Okay, I'm going to make the background a lot brighter when the firework explodes, and then of course I have to make sure that the background goes back to normal color. So I'm going to repeat 10 and change the brightness by -10. So change brightness, here we are, change brightness by -10. So I increase the background brightness by 100, and then I decrease it by 10 times. So it's going to become very bright, and then gradually it will go back to its normal brightness. Let's see what that looks like. So there we go. So there's lots that you can play around with, and you can create all sorts of interesting firework effects. This isn't the only firework effect. So a good thing to do is to have a look at one of the videos on YouTube of fireworks. This is one that I found, which is a really nice one. It's got lots of different fireworks that you can see. Some of them look pretty cool. So why not try copying one of those fireworks in Scratch? What you could do is, if you go to your rocket, instead of when you send the explode message in star, rather than always doing the same firework effect, you could use an if statement to detect, to make a random number, and then use if statements to pick one of the firework effects to do. So an example of that would be, instead of having star explosion here, I could make a random number. So I'm going to do, let's make a variable first of all. Make variable effect. Then I'll set effect to a random number 1 to 2. So that means that effect is going to be a variable between 1 and 2. Now if effect equals 1, so I'll go to operators and choose equals, which is there. So if effect equals 1, then I do star explosion. Now I can easily add a second effect, so I can have if, now choose equals, and variable effect equals 2. Now remember, I made this star explosion by making a block, so I click on block, and then I can create a new type of explosion. So let's say I do a wheel explosion. I could have like an explosion which is a spinning wheel. Now I'll tick run without screen refresh again and click OK. And this is a completely different piece of code which I could use to do a different type of explosion now. So I'm not going to write that explosion because I want to leave it for you. I think there's lots of different types of explosion that you can create, and I think each one of you guys could come up with something different. If we put them all together, we would have a really amazing fireworks show created in Scratch. So that's it for today's lesson. It's surprisingly addictive to watch these fireworks. I quite enjoy seeing them go, and there's lots of other stuff that you can add. You could also add some houses in the foreground, things like that, all sorts of different effects to create a really interesting scene.